Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Tanks with the mighty Jingles, and patch 9.10 is now out on the live servers, so that means lots and lots and lots of the new Japanese heavy tanks, and at least one decidedly mediocre Japanese medium tank. But it's the heavy tanks that are capturing everybody's imagination, and lots of you have wasted no time whatsoever grinding up that brand new Japanese heavy tank line, and some of you have been having absolutely hilarious games as a result, like this one. This is Gargantua, and he is driving the Japanese Tier 5 super heavy tank, the OI Experimental. This is a 100-ton tank that will do 40 kilometers per hour, and has a better power to weight ratio than the Tier 8 medium tank, the Super Pershing. It's also got very good gun depression and a very, very meaty gun. That 100mm gun does 300 average damage, fires more than 6 rounds per minute, so less than a 10-second reload, and has 130mm of penetration. That's enough to kill any Tier 5 medium tank in 2 shots, and if you get a good damage roll, you can one-shot a Tier 5 tank destroyer. So it's mobile, it's got a very, very good gun. What's the armour like? Well, the armour's alright, but you have to angle it. The actual raw thickness of the armour is nothing special, 75mm at the most. Have a look here. Side armour of 70mm, he turns, angles, bounces a shot from the enemy OI Experimental, there are 4 of them in this battle, and takes off nearly half of that guy's health with his return shot. This is not actually an especially heavily armoured tank. It's 75mm at the front, turret and hull, 70mm at the side, but as you can see, there are plenty of tanks in Tier 5 games that can penetrate 70 or 75mm of armour, and the armour on this tank has to be angled to be effective. That enemy OI Experimental was giving him the flat side of the tank, and so he just obliterated him. His platoon mate over there, not angling his armour, got himself wasted by the enemy tanks around that corner, while Gargantua was finishing off the Matilda. So, well, before anybody starts calling this tank overpowered, just bear in mind that there are 4 of them in this battle, and 2 of them have just died without killing anything. In fact, they were some of the first tanks dead. The actual armour thickness on this tank is actually not as good as the KV-1. The KV-1 actually has thicker armour than this machine, and it's a smaller target. KV-1, of course, doesn't get a gun that fires armour piercing and does 300 average damage. Just look at the mess he makes of this Churchill. Watch this. It's the gun, I think, that may justify claims of the OI Experimental being overpowered when it's top tier. This thing is definitely nothing special in a Tier 6 or a Tier 7 match, but in a Tier 5 match, this thing is a powerhouse if you know what you're doing, if you know how to angle your armour, because there are no real weaknesses in the armour. It's at worst 70mm everywhere. And here's another thing, those obvious weak spots in front of the tank, those machine gun turrets, yeah, they're not actually weak spots. They have 75mm of armour as well. If you were to just angle this tank at 45 degrees, you're going to have at least 100mm of effective armour everywhere, and that's what makes this thing special. In a Tier 5 game, again, Tier 6 or a Tier 7 game, even 100mm of effective armour is nothing fancy. And I do think that this tank, like its brother, its big brother at Tier 6, the OI, is going to be pretty overpowered in the hands of somebody who isn't completely incompetent when it's a top tier tank. And Gargantua here is going to show us the sort of thing I'm talking about. He's just about to claim his 7th kill, and this enemy OI Experimental hasn't done too badly either. He's managed to get 4 kills. The enemy T-25 has just finished off the Stug 3G. He's now on a Top Gun. There were actually 19 epic medals won by players in this battle. It was a phenomenal game. Gargantua, of course, is now alone against 4 enemy tanks, so there's a potential Kolobanov's medal up for grabs here. Rushes the shot against the Panzer IV-D, artillery misses him, takes a hit in the flank from the T-25. The T-25 is on 6 kills, so he's going to be the one to watch out for, but he's also a one-shot kill himself, so he's not going to be anxious to do anything risky. Panzer IV-D, initially I thought he was trying to lure Gargantua out so that he could be shot at by the T-25. Artillery misses him again, and he does take a hit from the T-25, but then the Panzer IV-D appears to suffer from a sudden rush of shit to the brain and commits suicide by Japanese Tier 5 heavy tank. Where did the T-25 go? He's on. Oh, artillery just missed again. But there's also a Vickers Medium Mark III. Oh, there he is. Poor guy. Tier 3 tank. At best, even if he's using the 2-pounder gun, he's only got 64mm of penetration, which is not going to be enough. There's the T-25. Starts backing up, changes his mind. That's going to be a big mistake. You don't want to be driving in front of the gun of this tank if you can possibly help it. And there's Gargantua's 10th kill. And now all he has to do to win is find and kill the artillery. But he's in a really big, slow, heavy tank. Well, actually, he isn't. He's in a really big, heavy tank, but it's not slow. It'll do 40 kilometers per hour. Even though it weighs over 100 tons. Well, in truth, it won't really do 40 kilometers per hour without some assistance, like a hill, for example. But it will quite comfortably reach speeds of 30 kilometers per hour on a good surface and level ground, as you can see him doing here. You know, this tank actually reminds me of the old KV-1S. Back when it was a Tier 6 tank, before it got nerfed and split into the KV-1S and the KV-85. That thing was a little overpowered when it was top tier as well. That's why the thing got nerfed. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if... Here's the thing though, I mean, how do you nerf this tank? Because it's definitely not overpowered in a Tier 7 match, and it's definitely not overpowered in a Tier 6 match. It's only really overpowered in a Tier 5 match if the guy driving it knows what he's doing, and the enemy are completely brainless. But this is World of Tanks, and there's a lot of that around, so I wouldn't be at all surprised to see these Japanese heavies get some rebalancing in the immediate future, although exactly what form that rebalancing is going to take to make these things still competitive at Tier 6 and 7, where they're definitely not overpowered, without making them completely useless. And that, by the way, is why I never fire high explosive at artillery, because it just doesn't kill them, does it? It doesn't penetrate, and it doesn't do full damage, and then you have to shoot them again. With 300 average damage on his armor piercing, if he just shot him with armor piercing, he'd have killed him instantly. Anyway, 11 kills for Gargantua in the brand new Japanese Tier 5 heavy, the OI Experimental. Overpowered? Maybe when it's top tier. But then again, I can offer a counter-argument providing evidence from this very battle, because Gargantua was not the only OI Experimental heavy tank in this game. There were 4 of them, and 2 of them did no damage and got no kills. So, is it the tank, or is it the person driving it? Because that's usually what makes the difference. So, OI Experimental, Tier 5 Japanese heavy tank. Overpowered? Let me know what you think. And while you're thinking about it, let's have a look at its big brother at Tier 6, the OI. Now, while you could argue the toss about the OI Experimental at Tier 5, and I'm sure you all will in the comments, in my mind there is absolutely no question that when you get to the Tier 6 and the OI, you are looking at what is possibly one of the most overpowered tanks when it's top tier in World of Tanks, with the possible exception of the Panzer IIJ. This thing is absolutely ridiculous. This thing has 150mm of armour all around on the turret. The front is 150mm thick, with no weak spots. Once again, those machine gun turrets also have 150mm of armour. The rear is 150mm thick. The sides are only 70. But once again, with just some rudimentary armour angling, if you were to angle this tank at 30 degrees, the front of the tank would be effectively 200mm thick, and you could increase the side armour with no more than 30 degrees of angling to around about 125 to 130mm of average thickness. And this is Tier 6. Holy shit. Yes, really. And you don't really have to worry too much about the side armour because it's spaced. In fact, there are 2 layers of spaced armour on the side. There's the spaced side armour itself, which is 35mm thick. The tracks count as another 40mm of spaced armour, and then you've got to get through the hull. In fact, the only place where there is actually 70mm of side armour on this tank is right there above the tracks. And you can always angle it. This tank really is absurd. Of course, it's nowhere near as mobile as its little brother. It has a speed limit of just under 30 km per hour, but in practice you're probably not going to get much above 20 km per hour without some assistance. It also has a power to weight ratio that makes the Super Pershing look good. It's only got 8 horsepower per ton, and that's with the top 1200 horsepower engine. The gun is... it's interesting. It does have the same 300 average damage, as you can quite clearly see there, as he's shooting up that VK361H. but it's not as rapid firing as what's mostly the same gun down at tier 5 on the OI experimental. This thing fires less than 6 rounds per minute, and it's not as accurate as the 100mm gun on the tier 5. But it does get 175mm of penetration, which is rather nice at tier 6, I'm sure you'll agree. What was the other tank at tier 6 that got 175mm of penetration and did a monster alpha damage? Oh yes, the KV-1S. That thing got nerfed into 2 different tanks, didn't it? This tank right here. What you're looking at now is the new KV-1S, and it's just as overpowered at tier 6 as the KV-1S used to be. The difference was that while the old KV-1S was monstrously powerful when it was a top tier tank, you could at least kill the KV-1S. It had that big old commander's hatch on top, and if you could get around the sides or rear, it was relatively easy to kill. But this thing's got 150mm of armour at the rear, and it's got 70mm of armour on the side, with 40mm of tracks, and 35mm of spaced armour outside the tracks. So good luck with that. And don't take my word for it. Just watch Tromy Durr here, in his OI, running up an absolute bloody cricket score against the enemy team here on Mines. His team were largely completely hopeless. Look at the scores, 3-9. Tromy hasn't even scored a kill yet, but don't worry, he will. His team are going to leave plenty for him to do. There's his first kill. He's nailed the 361H. Oh, incidentally, the Cromwell that managed to get above and behind him on the hill fired down into his... I'm not entirely sure whether or not the Cromwell... Oh, Churchill side-scraping nicely there. Managed to avoid getting killed. And he's putting shots into the spaced armor. He's penetrating, he's doing damage to the tracks, but he's not going through. There he goes again, and now he's dead too. Oh, here we go. Here he is. Well, I don't know why he's coming down. He's clearly sick of living. Yeah, expertly aimed shot. Straight into the front drive. We'll keep him there. You're not going anywhere, sunshine. Bouncy, bouncy, bouncy. Just wait for this thing to reload, and you're dead too. All these guys shooting down into the top of the tank. The top armour on the tank is also 50mm thick, and at that kind of angle shooting down into it, you're looking at about 76mm of effective armour thickness. I don't know how many shots he took from above. I think only one of them has penetrated. Now it gets interesting. Look at how he angles the tank there. That's about 30 degrees. He's the last one left alive on his team against 8 enemy tanks. This is where things start to get very, very amusing. Who are you going to shoot? You want to kill the ARL if you can. His 90mm gun can be a bit of a problem. The Lee, not so much an issue. The Sherman at the back there, not so much an issue. The Nashorn, however, could be a bit of an issue. Then again, you can kill the Lee with one shot, so he goes and does that. That Panzer IV-H is going to give him problems. He's managed to get around on the flank, and he's threatening to come around. Here comes an M4. M4 could have the howitzer with heat loaded, so takes him out next. Again, he's killing tanks that he can kill. And he's bouncing shots nicely from the Panzer IV-H with a 75mm gun. Nashorn being a bit cagey there, not wanting to come out. Can't really blame him. With 300 average damage, you don't want to get hit. But the Nashorn is bound... Oh crap, artillery. But then again, with 150mm of rear armour, just exactly how much damage is artillery high explosive going to do? Nothing. So he powers forward. This is where the speed of this thing comes into play. When you're going down a slope like this, he hits and sets the Nashorn on fire. 100 tons of tank, 30 kilometers per hour, ramming speed. So, okay, now there's only 4 of them left. The odds are half as bad as they were a minute ago. Who's he going to kill first? Oh, he's actually taken some damage there from the 3001H. Well, we can't have that. We'll kill the artillery first, because, well, you know, why not? Again, kill the tanks that you can kill. It's all about reducing the number of guns that are shooting at you. And not only that, if the artillery does manage to score a hit on him with high explosive and immobilise him, blow his tracks off, that gives the Panzer IV-H the opening he's been waiting for, so he can come around and shoot into his flank. That patch of armour above the tracks on the side, where there's no spaced armour and it's a pure 70mm of thickness. So now there's only 2 of them left. And the 3001H is not looking very clever. He's blown his tracks off. He's sideways on. The 3001H is penetrating, however. And the Panzer IV's just blown his tracks off and is wasting no time whatsoever in pummeling that side armour and actually doing some damage. Tromi uses his repair kit, backs up, gets his tracks back up, and improves his angle against the Panzer IV. He obviously desperately wants to finish off that 3001H, because he's a one-shot kill, but he can't do it with a Panzer IV on his flank. That Panzer IV definitely knew what he was doing. There's the Panzer IV again, looking for a shot round the other side. And he knows Tromi is just waiting for him to pop out. So he's waiting to drop off the radar, so Tromi no longer knows which side of the building to aim his gun around, and now he doesn't know where the 3001H is either. If the 3001H is working his way around that hill to come up behind Tromi, or even climb the hill, Tromi could be in trouble. He scored a good hit on the Panzer IV. Everybody in this game is now a one-shot kill. Of course, Tromi's got the armour, and these other two guys don't. Panzer IV again, waiting to drop off the radar. Tromi has decided he needs to know where that 3001H is. He can't make a move on the Panzer IV without knowing. And yep, he's still sitting there. He hasn't moved. He's got the opportunity to kill him. Armour angled at 30 degrees, bounces the shot, kills the 3001H. Panzer IV pops out, tries to take the shot. He's shooting, you see, it's new tank syndrome. He's shooting at the machine gun turrets at the front of the tank because he thinks they're weak spots. They're not. They have 150mm of armour, the same as everywhere on the front of this tank. So now it's 1v1. I think at this stage of the game that the Panzer IV is actually out of armour-piercing ammunition, and all he has left is high explosive. And well, you can imagine how well 75mm high explosive is going to do against 150mm of armour thickness. Not very well at all. But I'm guessing. The Panzer IV did fire a lot of ammunition during the course of this battle. I think he might have fired over 40 shots. We'll find out when we have a look at the post-battle stats. What Tromi is doing now is, as long as he and the Panzer IV are within 50 metres of each other, they always know exactly, regardless of the line of sight, they always know exactly where each other are. And so he's backing off to get more distance. So the Panzer IV isn't going to know which side of the building he's coming around. And I think the Panzer IV realised at the last moment and started backing off as well. If he did, smart move. And he's not there. Yep, the Panzer IV has also retreated, and that's a very smart move from the Panzer IV. If he's pulled back to some solid cover with some concealment around the corner of it, he can see Tromi coming, get the first shot and potentially kill him, and then pull back behind solid cover and... oh, no, he hasn't. Well, he could have. You see the bush on the right-hand side of that rock? He could have positioned himself there and gotten a free shot at Tromi's tank, and then pulled back around the rock. That is potentially a game-losing mistake from the Panzer IV driver. Still, it's difficult to criticise him too much. I mean, this is possibly one of the most overpowered tanks in the game he's fighting against. Tromi, again, same deal as before. He's pulling back so that both tanks are no longer spotted, and then he can attempt to get closer from an unexpected side, but he's moving a little too close. Potentially this Panzer IV could run the clock down. He's got the edge in manoeuvrability, which is the only advantage he has over this monster tank, and he could just keep driving around this rock for the next 5 minutes and force a draw. The only real way that Tromi can win this is if the Panzer IV makes a mistake. And the Panzer IV makes a mistake. He's taken his tracks. If he had a repair kit, he's used it. He takes a shot. No, sorry. And it's game over. It's kind of difficult to see the enemy team winning that. They could have, but they would have had to sacrifice tanks to do it. Somebody would have had to move forward and basically take one for the team. And then everybody else would have had to rush him at the same time and get around the sides. But that kind of teamwork just doesn't happen in random battles, and that's why this is an overpowered tank. I mean, the OI Experimental down at Tier 5, nah. It's a good tank, but it's no better than the KV-1. KV-1 actually has better armour, has similar mobility, and comparable DPM with its 85mm gun. In the hands of a good driver, any tank can be considered overpowered, but I don't think you have to be that good in a Tier 6 battle with a tank that's got 150mm of armour. I'm certainly not trying to take anything away from Tromy Durr here. I mean, he had an absolutely hopeless team. He played well, he didn't really make any mistakes, and he got a very, very good result. But I don't think he could have replicated that if he was in a 360-1H, for example. Or a Mark 7 Churchill. You know, I'm just saying, I think there's a difference. I think the tank that he was driving definitely helped him get that result. I mean, you know, the KV-85 is a decent tank as well, but it's not every day you bounce 5,165 points of damage in a KV-85, or a 360-1H, or hell, even a Churchill Mark 7 for that matter, and do 5,000 points of damage of your own. I'm just saying, I think the tank that Tromy Durr was driving probably was a major contributory factor towards the result that he got in that particular game, you know. I mean, you know, well played, not trying to take anything away, but yeah, I'd like to see you do that in a KV-85. And how about that poor Panzer 4H? There he is. It's a real heartbreaker for that guy. I think it's possible he did run out of armor-piercing ammunition, and if he had any premium ammunition, he'd fired it all. Premium ammunition from the 75mm gun on this tank has 158mm of penetration. Even that would not be able to penetrate the front of the OI if it's angled at 30 degrees. It couldn't penetrate the rear of the OI if it was angled at 30 degrees. The only place you can penetrate is that strip of armour above the side of the tracks where it's only 70mm thick. And he did hit him there multiple times, but it just wasn't enough. So my commiserations to the Panzer 4H driver, in fact my commiserations to the entire enemy team who played a blinder of a match right up until the point where Tromy Durr was the last tank alive, and from that point on there was really no way they were going to win. Certainly not without displaying the kind of teamwork that you just never see in random battles. So there you go, two of the brand new patch 9.10 Japanese super heavy tanks, the OI Experimental at tier 5, racking up 11 kills on Winterberg, and the OI tier 6, racking up another 11 kills and another Kolobanov's medal on mines. Are these tanks overpowered? Well, you've heard what I think. Hell yes, certainly in the case of the tier 6, but let's see what you think in the comments. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed today's video. I certainly think it was entertaining. It's not often you see 22 kills on 2 tanks. And as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.